My name is Haley, and at 32, I was the youngest VP of Strategic Development at Horizon Innovations. That Thursday evening, I was sorting files for the board meeting when a lawyer knocked on my door. "Ma'am, you were terminated 2 hours ago," he said firmly. "Impossible," I replied, straightening my blazer. "I'm about to lead the board meeting." He followed me through the hallway, his face a mask of professional detachment. Before I tell you how I went from almost being escorted out to taking over the company, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe for more corporate survival stories. 5 years ago, I graduated with my MBA from Wharton. I had multiple offers from prestigious firms, but Horizon Innovations caught my attention. They were a mid-sized tech company with genuinely innovative products, primarily focused on business intelligence software that helped companies make better strategic decisions. The irony of what would happen later wasn't lost on me. When I first joined, I was impressed by CEO Andrew Watson. In his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, he had built Horizon from the ground up over 15 years. He had a reputation for being brilliant but demanding. What I didn't know then was that his brilliance was increasingly being overshadowed by his paranoia about losing control. I started in product development but quickly demonstrated a talent for identifying growth opportunities. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice, eventually becoming the Vice President of Strategic Development. My rapid rise was unusual, but my results spoke for themselves. I had spearheaded initiatives that increased our market share by 20% and developed partnerships that boosted our revenue by $30 million annually. My closest allies at Horizon were COO Patricia Reynolds, a seasoned executive with 20 years of experience, who became my mentor, and CFO Michael Harrison, a meticulous financial expert who appreciated my data-driven approach. Together we formed an unofficial coalition of executives who were trying to guide the company towards sustainable growth while working around Andrew's increasingly erratic decision-making. My crowning achievement at Horizon was leading the development of Aurora, our groundbreaking AI-driven business intelligence platform. Aurora represented the future of the company, combining cutting-edge machine learning algorithms with intuitive user interfaces that could revolutionize how businesses use data. The project had been my baby, from conception to launch, and early client feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Initially, Andrew supported the Aurora project, even calling it the future of Horizon in company meetings. But as the project gained momentum and attention, both internally and in the industry, I noticed his attitude changing. He began questioning decisions that had already been approved, demanding last-minute changes that would have delayed the launch, and excluding me from meetings with potential Aurora clients. The tension came to a head during a series of strategy meetings in the months leading up to that fateful board meeting. I had prepared a comprehensive 5-year growth plan centered around Aurora, with projections showing we could triple our valuation within 3 years. When I presented it to the executive team, Andrew dismissed it as overly optimistic and naive, without offering any substantive criticism. After that meeting, James Bennett, our board chairman, pulled me aside. James was in his early 60s, a veteran of the tech industry who had seen it all. "That was impressive work, Haley," he said. "Don't let Andrew get to you. The board sees the value in your vision." That conversation gave me hope, but also made me realize that Andrew might see me as a threat to his position. In the following weeks, I noticed other concerning behaviors. Important emails would go unanswered. My team members would be reassigned without my knowledge. Resources promised for Aurora follow-up development would be reallocated. Then came the most troubling discovery. While reviewing some financial documentation for the upcoming board meeting, I noticed irregularities in Andrew's expense reports. There were multiple instances of lavish personal expenses being classified as business development costs, including a $70,000 client retreat to his vacation home in Aspen, where no clients were present. I faced an ethical dilemma. Reporting the financial irregularities was the right thing to do, but I knew it would put me directly in Andrew's crosshairs. After careful consideration and a confidential conversation with Patricia, I decided to document everything thoroughly, but wait until after the upcoming board meeting to bring it to the audit committee. The board meeting was focused on our strategic direction, and I didn't want to derail that important conversation with what would inevitably become a scandal. The night before the board meeting, I stayed late at the office, organizing all my materials. The presentation I had prepared was comprehensive, addressing our market position, competitive threats, resource allocation, and 5-year growth projections. I had backup data for every assertion and contingency plans for various scenarios. This was potentially the most important presentation of my career, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Little did I know that Andrew had already set his plan in motion to ensure I would never make it to that meeting. It was nearly 7 in the evening when I heard the knock on my office door. I looked up from the stack of financial reports I was organizing to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing in the doorway. He was tall and lean, with perfectly groomed dark hair, and the kind of confident posture that only comes from years of delivering bad news to people. "Haley Carter," he asked, though it was clear he knew exactly who I was. "Yes, can I help you?" I replied already, sensing something was off. He stepped into my office and placed a leather portfolio on my desk. "My name is Gregory Martinez, IM from Aldridge Sutton and Pierce. IM here regarding your termination from Horizon Innovations." For a moment I thought I had misheard him. "My what?" "Your employment was terminated at 4:45 this afternoon. I'm here to oversee the collection of your personal items and escort you from the building." His voice was cold and professional, devoid of any empathy. I stared at him, waiting for some indication that this was a bizarre prank. When none came, I said, "That's impossible. I'm the VP of Strategic Development. I have a board presentation tomorrow morning." Gregory opened his portfolio and slid a document across my desk. "Your termination was processed and approved 2 hours ago. The reason cited is performance issues and violation of company policies." I glanced at the paper, my confusion turning to shock, when I saw what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. "This isn't my signature. I never signed this." "Ma'am, I'm just here to facilitate your exit. You also signed a severance agreement." He produced another document with my supposed signature. "It's quite generous. 6-month salary plus benefits." My mind was racing. Someone had forged my signature on multiple documents. There was only one person with both the motivation and the authority to orchestrate this, Andrew. "I never signed any of these documents," I said, firmly pulling out my phone. "I'm taking photos of these forgeries." Gregory frowned. "Ma'am, that's confidential company property." "It's fraudulent company property," I corrected him, snapping several photos. "And I'm about to walk into the executive conference room and inform the board members who are already gathering for pre-meeting discussions." His expression changed from confident to concerned. "The board meeting isn't until tomorrow." "The formal meeting is tomorrow, but most board members arrive the evening before for dinner and preliminary discussions, which you would know if you weren't being manipulated into participating in fraud." I stood up and gathered my presentation materials. "You can follow me or not, but I'm going to that conference room." Gregory moved to block my path. "Miss Carter, if you don't comply, I am authorized to call security to escort you from the building." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Call them. I'd like witnesses for what's about to happen." His confidence faltered slightly, but he maintained his position. "Your building access has already been revoked." "Well, see about that." I brushed past him and headed for the door. After a moment's hesitation, I heard his footsteps following me. The elevator ride to the executive floor was tense. Gregory stood rigidly beside me, occasionally glancing at his watch as if calculating his billable hours. When the doors opened, I stepped out confidently, despite my internal turmoil. The security guard at the executive floor desk looked up in surprise. "Miss Carter, I thought you left already." "Clearly not," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The board members have arrived for the pre-meeting rite." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. They started gathering about 20 minutes ago." I approached the conference room door and waved my badge at the scanner. The light remained red. Gregory stepped forward, a satisfied expression on his face. "As I explained, your access has been revoked." Just then, the door opened from inside. Patricia Reynolds stood there elegant, as always, in her navy blue suit, her expression changing from pleasant to confused when she saw me. "Haley? I thought Andrew said you couldn't make it tonight." "Did he?" Now I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Patricia Andrew has apparently terminated my employment without my knowledge and forged my signature on the documents. I need to speak to the board immediately." Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed as she processed this information. She glanced at Gregory, then back at me. After a moment's consideration, she stepped aside. "Come in." The executive conference room fell silent as I entered. Around the polished mahogany table sat the 8 members of Horizon's board, along with Andrew and Michael. They were all dressed in business attire, coffee cups and water glasses scattered between their notebooks and tablets. All eyes turned to me, but it was Andrew's reaction that confirmed my suspicions. His face drained of color, and he half rose from his seat at the head of the table. "Haley?" he said, his voice a mix of surprise and anger. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Gregory stepped in behind me. "I'm sorry for the interruption. This former employee is refusing to comply with termination procedures. I'll call security to remove her." Former employee James Bennett, the board chairman, looked between Andrew and me, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in confusion. "What's going on here?" Andrew quickly composed himself. "James the First was going to inform the board tomorrow. After careful consideration, I made the difficult decision to terminate Haley's employment this afternoon due to ongoing performance issues. She accepted a generous severance package." "That's a lie," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I was just informed of this supposed termination less than 10 minutes ago by a lawyer I never met, before showing me documents with forged signatures." "That's a serious accusation," said Sarah Montgomery, one of our longest-serving board members. She turned to Gregory. "You are—" "Gregory Martinez from Aldridge Sutton and Pierce," he replied now, looking slightly uncomfortable as he sensed the tension in the room. "And you have documentation of this termination?" James asked. Gregory nodded and opened his portfolio, producing the termination letter and severance agreement. James took them and studied them carefully, then passed them around the table. "These documents have Haley's signature." Andrew said, an edge of desperation in his voice. "She agreed to everything this afternoon. This is just a case of employees' remorse." "I was preparing for this meeting all afternoon," I countered. "Patricia was with me for part of that time. Were my signatures on these documents witnessed by anyone?" A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of my question sank in. The board members exchanged glances as the documents made their way around the table. I could see the growing discomfort on their faces as they considered the possibility that their CEO might have forged an executive's signature. "I can confirm that Haley and I were reviewing the Aurora expansion strategy from 2 to 3:30 this afternoon," Patricia said, breaking the silence. "And Michael joined us from 3:30 to 4:15 to go over the financial projections." Michael nodded, though he looked uncomfortable, contradicting Andrew. "That's correct. We were in the small conference room down the hall from Haley's office." Gregory Martinez shifted his weight nervously. The termination was processed at 4:45. Perhaps the meeting ended, and then. "I sent emails from my desk at 5:12 and 6:20, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my email app. "I have the sent timestamps. I also have security camera footage of me at my desk during the supposed time I was signing these papers. This last part was a bluff, but I suspected Andrew wouldn't know whether the security cameras backed up my story." Andrew stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "This is ridiculous. You're all going to take her word over mine. I've built this company from nothing." James raised a hand calmly. "Andrew, please sit down. We're just trying to understand the situation." "There is no situation to understand," Andrew snapped. "I terminated an underperforming employee who has been repeatedly exceeding her authority and undermining my leadership. It was time to play my trump card. Is that why you've been redirecting company funds for personal use?" The room went deadly quiet. "What did you just say?" James asked, his voice low. I placed my laptop on the table and opened it. While preparing for this board meeting, I discovered multiple instances where company funds were used for Andrew's personal expenses, including a $70,000 weekend at his Aspen home that was classified as a client retreat despite no clients being present. "That's an outrageous accusation," Andrew shouted, his face now flushed red. "You're just trying to deflect from your own failures?" I connected my laptop to the room's display system, and the screen at the end of the room lit up with a spreadsheet. These are expense reports from the last 18 months. The highlighted items are all personal expenses, incorrectly classified as business costs. The total exceeds $300,000. Andrew lunged toward the screen controls. "This presentation is unauthorized." Michael cleared his throat. Actually, some of these discrepancies had caught my attention as well. I was planning to discuss them with Andrew privately after the quarterly close. Sarah Montgomery leaned forward, her expression severe. "Michael, as CFO, why didn't you bring this to the board's attention immediately?" Michael paled slightly. "I wanted to verify my findings before making accusations. And to be honest, I was concerned about potential repercussions. Like being fired with forged paperwork," Patricia suggested dryly. Gregory Martinez was now looking decidedly uncomfortable. "I think I should step out while you discuss these internal matters." "Stay right where you are," James commanded. "I have questions about your firm's involvement in this situation." Gregory reluctantly remained standing near the door. "I think we need to call an emergency executive session of the board," James said, looking around the table. All the board members nodded in agreement. "Andrew, Patricia, Michael, and Haley, please wait outside. Mr. Martinez, you'd better stay as well." As we filed out of the room, Andrew grabbed my arm roughly. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed before Patricia stepped between us. The conference room door closed, leaving us in the hallway, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I had laid all my cards on the table, but I had no idea what would happen next. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression neutral. This was corporate poker at its highest stakes, and I couldn't afford to show weakness now. The five of us stood awkwardly in the hallway outside the conference room. Andrew paced back and forth like a caged animal, occasionally shooting venomous glances in my direction. Patricia positioned herself subtly between us while Michael stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Gregory Martinez had retreated to a leather chair in the waiting area, busily typing on his phone. After a few minutes of tense silence, Patricia touched my elbow. "Let's get some coffee," she suggested, giving me an opportunity to move away from Andrew. We walked to the executive lounge at the end of the hall, with Michael following after a moment's hesitation. Once we were alone, Patricia turned to me with concern in her eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I took a deep breath. I'm still processing everything. 1 minute in preparing for the most important presentation of my career, and the next being told I'm fired with paperwork I never signed. Michael cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I had no idea Andrew was planning this. He mentioned concerns about your performance last week, but nothing about termination." My performance, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Aurora is exceeding all projections. My team has the highest satisfaction scores in the company. What possible performance issues could he cite?" Patricia sighed. "It's not about performance, Haley. It's about control. You were becoming too visible, too valuable. The board respects you, the team loves you, and Aurora is increasingly seen as the future of the company." Andrew couldn't handle it. The realization had been forming in my mind, but hearing Patricia say it out loud made everything click into place. I thought back to all the times Andrew had undermined my work over the past year. The Aurora launch party where he had barely mentioned my name in his speech, despite my role as project lead. The investors' meeting where Head interrupted my presentation repeatedly, then claimed credit for key insights ID developed. The time Head reassigned 2 of my top developers without consulting me, then blamed me when a deadline was missed. The strategic partnership with Tech Global that I'd negotiated for months, only to have Andrew step in at the last minute as the closer. "Has done this before, hasn't he?" I asked, the pattern suddenly becoming clear. Patricia and Michael exchanged glances. Remember Justin Parker? Patricia asked. VP of Customer Experience before Rachel? I nodded. Justin had left the company abruptly about a year before I joined. He was developing a customer success methodology that was getting attention from industry analysts. Andrew felt threatened, and suddenly Justin was gone. The official story was that he resigned to pursue other opportunities. And Melissa Chen, our former marketing director, Michael added. She questioned some of Andrew's spending at a leadership meeting 3 years ago. 2 weeks later, she was terminated for alleged policy violations. My stomach tightened as I realized the extent of the pattern. How many others? At least 5 senior leaders in the past 7 years, Patricia said grimly. Always the same pattern. They start gaining too much influence, or ask too many questions, and suddenly they're gone. Our conversation was interrupted by Gregory Martinez entering the executive lounge. He looked distinctly uncomfortable as he approached us. Miss Carter, he began formally. I want to speak with you privately. I glanced at Patricia and Michael. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my colleagues. Gregory hesitated, then nodded. Very well. It appears I may have been given incomplete information regarding your termination. Mr. Watson personally handled the preparation of the documents and assured our firm that all proper protocols had been followed. Including my signature, I asked pointedly. He had the grace to look embarrassed. The documents were presented to us as already executed. We were simply engaged to handle the exit process. He lowered his voice. For what it's worth, I'm documenting everything about our firm's involvement to provide to the board and potentially to the authorities if needed. Before I could respond, Patricia received a text message. She glanced at her phone. James wants Haley back in the boardroom. She looked up at me. Just you for now. I straightened my jacket and took a deep breath. Wish me luck. As I walked back toward the conference room, I passed Andrew's office and noticed something strange. Through the partially open door, I could see him frantically feeding documents into a shredder. Our eyes met briefly through the gap, and what I saw in his gaze wasn't just anger. It was fear. When I reached the conference room, I was surprised to see a security officer standing outside the door. He nodded respectfully as James opened the door to let me in. Please join us, Haley James, said, his expression serious but not unkind. The atmosphere in the room had changed. The board members sat straighter, their expressions grave. A woman I recognized as Diane Lewis, our corporate counsel, had joined them at the table. Haley James began. Once I was seated, we've had a preliminary discussion about the concerning events that have come to light this evening. First, let me assure you that your employment with Horizon has not been terminated. Those documents appear to have been executed improperly. I felt a wave of relief, but kept my expression professional. Thank you for clarifying that. The board has voted to place Andrew on administrative leave effective immediately, pending a full investigation into both the falsified termination documents and the financial irregularities you've identified. James continued. Diane will be overseeing the investigation, alongside an independent accounting firm. I nodded, still processing this dramatic turn of events. Now, James said, leaning forward slightly, despite these extraordinary circumstances, we still have a company to run and a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Are you prepared to deliver your strategic presentation, as originally planned? For a brief moment, doubt crept in. After everything that had happened, could I really refocus and deliver a complex strategic presentation? Then I remembered all the work I'd put in, all the late nights and detailed analyses. I thought of my team who had helped develop Aurora and the vision we'd created together. Yes, I said with confidence I wasn't entirely sure I felt. I'm ready. The next morning, I stood at the head of the conference room table, facing the full board of directors. My presentation materials were perfectly organized, my talking points clear in my mind, despite the tumultuous events of the previous evening. Patricia sat to my right, occasionally giving me an encouraging nod. The chair at the head of the table, Andrew's usual seat, remained conspicuously empty. Thank you all for your attention today. I began, my voice steady. Despite the unusual circumstances, I believe it's crucial that we focus on Horizon's strategic direction and the tremendous opportunities ahead of us. For the next hour, I walked the board through my comprehensive vision for Horizon Innovations. I outlined how Aurora could become the cornerstone of our business strategy, with projections showing potential revenue growth of 40% year over year. I detailed the market expansion opportunities, competitive analysis, resource requirements, and implementation timelines. Every assertion was backed by data, every projection based on conservative assumptions. The board members were engaged throughout, asking thoughtful questions that I was able to answer confidently. When I concluded, there was a moment of silence before James spoke. Thank you, Haley. That was one of the most thorough and compelling strategic presentations I've seen in my 30 years in this industry. Sarah Montgomery, who had a reputation for being the toughest critic on the board, nodded in agreement. I'm particularly impressed with how you've identified and addressed potential risks in the implementation phase. This isn't just a vision, it's a practical roadmap. The other board members added their positive feedback, and I felt a sense of professional satisfaction despite the chaos surrounding the situation with Andrew. After a brief break, James reconvened the meeting to discuss interim leadership arrangements. Given the circumstances, we need to establish a temporary structure while the investigation proceeds. The board proposes that Patricia serve as acting CEO with Haley and Michael, maintaining their current roles but taking on additional oversight responsibilities. Patricia appeared surprised, but quickly composed herself. I'm willing to step in, however. The company needs me. Additionally, James continued, like Haley, to lead a special task force on company restructuring to ensure that the issues we've discovered don't extend beyond what we've already identified. This would be in addition to your current responsibilities, with appropriate resources provided. I accept, I said, recognizing both the opportunity and the challenge this represented. The following days were among the most intense of my professional life. While continuing to lead my department and the Aurora platform development, I also worked closely with the forensic accounting team, investigating Andrew's financial misconduct. Patricia, Michael, and I formed a tight leadership triangle, meeting multiple times daily to ensure the company continued to function smoothly, despite the turmoil at the top. What we discovered was worse than I'd initially thought. Andrew's financial improprieties went back at least 3 years and totaled nearly $1 million. He'd created fake vendors, approved questionable consulting agreements with friends, and classified numerous personal expenses as business costs. More troublingly, Wed found evidence that he had indeed forced out at least 7 senior executives who had either questioned his decisions or become too popular within the company. Despite the internal challenges, we made sure that client relationships remained stable. I personally reached out to our top 20 clients to reassure them about Horizon's direction and to showcase the latest Aurora enhancements. The market responded positively to the leadership change, with our stock price actually increasing by 7% in the week following Andrew's suspension. Meanwhile, I worked with my team to implement the first phase of the strategic plan I'd presented to the board. We accelerated the Aurora development roadmap, initiated discussions with 3 potential international partners, and realigned our product offerings to maximize cross-selling opportunities. The early results were promising, with new client acquisitions up 15% compared to the previous quarter. 1 week after Andrew's suspension, James called an emergency board meeting. Patricia, Michael, and I were asked to present the complete findings of our investigation, along with recommendations for moving forward. The boardroom was silent as we walked through the evidence. The forensic accountants had documented 42 specific instances of financial misconduct, ranging from small expense account abuses to significant misappropriation of company resources. The legal team had identified potential criminal violations, including fraud and falsification of corporate records. When we finished our presentation, the board moved into executive session. Patricia, Michael, and I waited outside, the weight of the past week evident in our tired eyes and tense postures. After 45 minutes, we were called back in. James stood as we entered. The board has reached a unanimous decision, he announced formally. Andrew Watson is terminated for cause effective immediately. We will be referring the evidence of financial misconduct to the appropriate authorities for potential criminal proceedings. There was a collective exhale in the room. Additionally, James continued, the board has decided on a new leadership structure for Horizon Innovations. Patricia, we would like to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer on a permanent basis. Patricia nodded solemnly. I accept and thank you for your trust. Michael, you will continue as CFO with expanded oversight of our financial controls. Michael smiled slightly. I'll make sure nothing like this happens again. And Haley, James turned to me in recognition of your exceptional leadership and the critical role you've played in both identifying these issues and developing our path forward. The board would like to offer you the position of Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer, with a seat on the board. I felt a momentary surge of emotion that I quickly controlled. I'm honored by your confidence, and I accept. James smiled for the first time that day. There's one more thing. The board has determined that someone needs to officially inform Andrew of our decision. He looked directly at me. Haley, given what you experienced, we believe it would be appropriate for you to deliver this message, if you're comfortable doing so. I considered the request. There would be a certain poetic justice in being the one to tell Andrew that Head lost everything Head tried to take from me. But more importantly, I wanted closure, to look him in the eye one last time, and show him that his attempts to destroy my career had not only failed, but backfired spectacularly. I'll do it, I said. The following morning I drove to Andrew's sprawling Tudor-style home in the exclusive Lakeside Estates neighborhood. Security Chief Robert Thompson accompanied me both for official purposes and, though unspoken, for my protection. Andrew had been instructed to remain at home and expect company representatives, though he hadn't been told specifically who was coming. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noted the perfectly manicured lawn and the Mercedes and Porsche parked outside the 3-car garage. All the trappings of success, some of it apparently funded by Horizon, without authorization. Robert rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Andrew opened the door. He was dressed casually in expensive-looking loafers, designer jeans, and a crisp button-down shirt, a stark contrast to his usual impeccable suits. For a second, he appeared confused. Then his expression hardened when he recognized me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, blocking the doorway. "Mr. Watson," Robert said formally, "we're here on official Horizon Innovations business. May we come in?" Andrew hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. "Fine. Let's get this over with." He led us to a spacious living room with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a perfectly landscaped backyard with a pool. Family photos lined the mantel above a massive stone fireplace. Andrew with his wife and 2 college-age children, all smiling in various vacation settings. I wondered if his family knew what was coming. "I assume this is about the leave of absence," Andrew said, remaining standing, while gesturing for us to sit. "I've been considering my options, and am willing to agree to a 30-day cooling-off period if the board drops this ridiculous investigation." His confidence was almost impressive. Either he truly believed he could still salvage the situation, or he was putting on a brave face. "That's not why we're here," I said, opening my leather portfolio and removing a set of documents. "The board has completed its preliminary investigation and reached a final decision." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Andrew's face, but he quickly recovered, assuming an expression of smug confidence. "And they sent you as their messenger. That seems inappropriate given your accusations." "The board specifically requested that I deliver their decision," I replied calmly. "As the person you attempted to terminate with forged documents, they felt it was fitting." I placed the termination papers on the coffee table between us. "Andrew Watson, your employment with Horizon Innovations is terminated for cause effective immediately. The cause includes, but is not limited to, financial misconduct, falsification of corporate records, and creating a hostile work environment." The color drained from his face as he stared at the documents. "This is absurd. I'm the founder. I built Horizon from nothing. The forensic accounting team has identified 42 specific instances of financial misconduct over the past 3 years, totaling approximately $970,000. I continued keeping my voice even. The evidence has been provided to the district attorney's office for review and potential criminal charges. Andrew sank onto the couch, his facade of confidence crumbling. This is your doing. You turned them against me. You did that yourself, I replied. The board simply followed the evidence. You've wanted my job from day one, he said, his voice rising. You came in with your fancy MBA and your slick presentations undermining me at every turn. I never wanted your job, Andrew. I wanted to help grow the company. He laughed bitterly. Right. That's why you went behind my back to the board. That's why you dug through my expenses looking for ammunition. I found the discrepancies while preparing financial projections for Aurora, I explained. Once I saw the pattern, I had an ethical obligation to report it. Andrew's expression shifted from anger to a calculated calm that was somehow more disturbing. You know, Haley, you remind me of myself 20 years ago. Ambitious, ruthless when necessary, willing to step on others to get ahead. I'm nothing like you, I said firmly. No. He leaned forward. Then why are you here? You could have sent HR or legal to deliver this message. But you wanted to see me brought low. You wanted to savor the moment. He smiled thinly. That's exactly what I would have done. His words unsettled me, but I maintained my professional demeanor. I'm here because the board requested it, and because I wanted closure. Well, here's your closure, Andrew said suddenly, grabbing the termination papers and ripping them in half. I'm not going quietly. I'll fight this every step of the way. I'll sue for wrongful termination. I'll make counter-accusations. By the time the lawyers are done, there will be nothing left of Horizon. Robert stepped forward at this outburst, but I raised a hand to stop him. You're entitled to pursue whatever legal avenues you choose, I said. But you should know that we've recovered the original termination documents you falsified, complete with my forged signature. The forensic handwriting analyst has already confirmed the forgery originated from you. Andrew froze. Additionally, I continued, we've identified and interviewed the 3 contractors you used to create fake invoices. They've provided complete statements in exchange for immunity. And we've recovered files from the company server that you thought you'd deleted, including emails discussing how to conceal personal expenses as business costs. His face contorted with rage. You think you're so clever, don't you? So perfect. Well, power changes people, Haley. In 6 months or a year, you'll be making the same decisions I made. You'll start small. A personal dinner charged to the company here. A favor for a friend there. Then it gets easier. Before you know it, you'll be exactly where I am. I stood gathering my portfolio. No, Andrew, I won't. Because unlike you, I remember that leadership is about service, not entitlement. It's about building something larger than yourself, not taking from it. Sanctimonious bullshit, he spat. You'll see. I placed another document on the table. This is the official termination letter. It outlines the severance terms, which are more generous than you deserve, along with non-disclosure and non-disparagement provisions. You have 48 hours to sign and return it, or the offer will be withdrawn. As I turned to leave, Andrew called after me. They'll turn on you too, eventually. The board, your allies, your team. When you're no longer useful, they'll discard you, just like they've discarded me. I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. For a moment I felt a twinge of pity. Despite all his success, his wealth, his achievements, Andrew Watson was fundamentally a fearful man who believed the only way to win was to ensure others lost. Goodbye, Andrew, I said simply, and walked out the door. As we drove away, Robert glanced at me. That went better than I expected. I thought he'd throw something. I smiled slightly. He considered it. Did you see him eyeing that crystal paperweight? We shared a brief laugh and I felt a weight lifting. It wasn't about victory or retribution. It was about accountability and creating the space for something better to grow. 3 months later, I sat at the boardroom table, in a very different position than I'd ever imagined. As the newest board member and chief strategy officer, I had a nameplate at the table, rather than a seat along the wall. The transformation at Horizon had been remarkable in this short time, and today we were reviewing our quarterly results, the first full quarter, under the new leadership team. Patricia stood at the head of the table, confidently walking through the performance highlights. Revenue is up 22% year-over-year, driven primarily by Aurora adoptions and our expanded international presence. Client retention has improved to 97%, and employee satisfaction scores are at an all-time high of 88%. The board members nodded appreciatively, several making notes as she spoke. Most significantly, Patricia continued our operating margin has improved by 4 percentage points due to the cost control measures and efficiency improvements implemented by Michael's team. Michael, who had thrived in his expanded role, added, "We've also completely overhauled our financial controls. Every expenditure over $5,000 now requires dual approval, and we've implemented randomized auditing of expense reports at all levels." "The market has certainly noticed," James commented. "Our share price is up 32% since the leadership change." When the performance review concluded, I presented the next phase of our strategic roadmap. The Aurora platform had become the cornerstone of our business, just as it envisioned, with 3 new modules launched and 2 more in development. WED established partnerships with companies in Europe and Asia, expanding our global footprint significantly. "The technological innovation is impressive," Sarah Montgomery noted, "but am equally impressed by the cultural transformation. The energy in the building is palpable." She was right. One of my first actions as Chief Strategy Officer had been to create a more transparent leadership culture. WED instituted monthly town halls where any employee could ask questions directly to the executive team. WED revised the compensation structure to reward collaboration rather than internal competition. And WED established a robust ethics program that encouraged reporting of concerns without fear of retaliation. "I agree," James said. "Which brings us to the next agenda item. The Board Governance Committee has drafted new corporate governance procedures based on the lessons we've learned." He distributed a document to each of us. "I'd like to thank Haley for her significant contributions to this framework." I had indeed worked closely with the Governance Committee, determined to create structural protections against the kind of abuse of power WED experienced under Andrew. The new procedures included term limits for the CEO position, expanded whistleblower protections, and mandatory rotation of board committee assignments to prevent entrenchment. After the board unanimously approved the new governance procedures, we moved to our final agenda item. "As you know," Patricia said, "we've been conducting a careful review of the executives who left Horizon under questionable circumstances during Andrew's tenure. Based on that review, we've extended offers to 3 former executives to rejoin the company in appropriate roles." This had been a particularly meaningful initiative for me. Justin Parker had accepted a position leading our customer success organization. Melissa Chen had returned to head our now expanded marketing team. And Thomas Rivera, a brilliant product developer who had been forced out 2 years ago, was now leading our innovation lab. "Their institutional knowledge has been invaluable," I added, "and they've brought fresh perspectives from their time away from Horizon. It's been a win-win situation." As the meeting concluded and board members gathered their materials, James approached me. "A word, Haley." We stepped into his office, adjacent to the boardroom. "I wanted to check in on a personal level," he said once WED sat down. "It's been a whirlwind few months for you, moving from nearly being terminated to joining the board and transforming the company." I smiled. "It has been intense, but honestly also incredibly fulfilling." "Any second thoughts about the path we took?" I considered his question carefully. None about holding Andrew accountable. That was necessary for the company, and the right thing to do ethically. Sometimes I do reflect on whether we could have seen the warning signs earlier and prevented some of the damage. James nodded thoughtfully. "In my experience, the most dangerous leaders are often the most charismatic. They create a reality distortion field that makes it difficult to question them, even when evidence suggests you should. That's why the structural changes were so important, I replied. No matter how trustworthy current leadership may be, the right checks and balances protect the organization from potential future abuse. A lesson many companies learn too late, if at all, James agreed. You know, when I recommended you for the board position, there were questions about your experience level. But I found that character and judgment often matter more than years of service. You demonstrated both when it counted most. I felt a surge of gratitude for his mentorship during this challenging period. Thank you for your confidence in me. I don't take it for granted. As I left James' office and walked through the now familiar corridors of Horizon, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. What had begun as a crisis had transformed into an opportunity for growth, not just for me professionally, but for the entire organization. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about corporate ethics, leadership, and personal resilience. It learned that integrity isn't just a nice-to-have corporate value to list on the website, it's the foundation everything else is built upon. It discovered that true leadership isn't about power over others, but about empowering others. And it found that sometimes the most difficult challenges reveal strengths you never knew you had. Most importantly, it learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult or risky, is always the best long-term strategy. The easier path of looking the other way or accepting unethical behavior might seem expedient in the moment, but ultimately leads to far greater costs, both organizational and personal. As I entered my office, I smiled at the framed photo on my desk. It showed our new executive team at the recent company picnic, laughing together as we served ice cream to employees' children. The contrast with Andrew's leadership style couldn't have been more stark. The journey wasn't over, of course. We still had challenges to overcome, markets to conquer, and innovations to develop. But now we were facing those challenges with integrity, transparency, and a shared commitment to building something meaningful together. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up against wrongdoing in your workplace or personal life? I'd love to hear how you handled it and what you learned from the experience. Please share your stories in the comments below. And if this corporate survival story resonated with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with others who might need inspiration to speak truth to power. Remember, sometimes the moments that test us most are the ones that transform us for the better. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and integrity on yours.